Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I'm your host, MGCovers. This is episode 64. Hard to believe we got 64 episodes in the books. Pretty consistent with this since we made a decision to do it weekly. And I always look forward to waking up Monday morning and just sort of freelancing my thoughts on me as a handicapper, sharing some insights into personal life a little bit, and then mainly focusing on how my approach to sports handicapping. So greatly appreciate everybody that supports this podcast by listening on YouTube or watching it live, and then also listening to the audio version on Spotify or Apple. So greatly appreciate that support. Like to cover in this podcast, go ahead and give you an outline. We're going to talk about, obviously we made changes to the Major League Baseball model. Huge improvement last week. I'll share those results. In the bulk of this podcast, we're going to talk about the classes model and application to what sports that works best. And I'm going to sort of give you an overview of how it works. And I think if you're somebody that aspires to build models, it's a very simple way to do it. There's some subjectivity factored into it, but if you understand the overall concept, I think it's something that you can apply to definitely, college sports and then maybe even professional sports. I'll show you a WNBA example at the end. Super excited you're tuning in. A little bit of personal life. Had a fun day. We played Las Corrales golf course. A buddy of mine, where I'm a member at, when they have a tournament, they had a tournament at my course, so we got to play Las Corrales. And if you don't know anything about the Dominican, that's where they have I say Las Corrales, it's actually Corrales. It's where they play the PGA Tour events, like $500 to play. But because we're members at the other course and they had a tournament at our course, we get to play it for 75. So it's a lot of fun. Struggling with my golf game big time. I have some kind of mental block. I'm not sure what it is, but hitting the ball really well on a range. And I think it's probably putting too much pressure on myself when I play. Shot an 83, which I'm a 3.2 handicap right now, so way above my handicap. Obviously not going to shoot well all the time, but had some mental blocks there on the golf course. So hopefully I can fight through that. Very similar to sports handicapping, playing golf and trying to improve as a grind, as well as improving it in this business as a grind as well. All right, so let's start out. I'm going to show you some results. As you know, we made changes to the Major League Baseball model. Huge difference. This was numbers from last week. $1,300 in profit. Only had 10 plays. The start the week out, you look down there at the bottom, we had a couple using the top-down approach. There's a video on that as well. If you follow the YouTube channel, you'll see it. So I think we opened up playing some using that concept, hit LA Angels in Texas there, and then the rest of that was just, using the model. So the changes we made have been really good changes. I think it's going to we're end up playing less volume, which is fine, especially if we can increase the accuracy. And that was sort of the problem with the old model, the way we were capping. We're playing a ton of volume, but still hitting, less than 50%, and just wasn't profitable the way we're doing it, making changes now. And of course, handicapping, putting starting pitching back into the model has made a huge difference in this. And then I will want to point out, yesterday we had Chicago plus 118, Pittsburgh plus 123. That was actually the wrong play for Chicago Cubs. I'm going to send out a formal video to clients, but it should have been Houston. That was just a mistake on my part. So if we'd have played Houston, we'd have had a huge day, ended up with almost a $2,000 week. So that's exciting and promising, and pretty much going to do the same thing again this week with that model. And I will mention this, if you're a client or if you're interested in becoming a client, it's very inexpensive, $50 a month. It gives you access to all my lines for each sports, and as well as all the coaching videos on the site. One thing I did since we made changes to the model, you actually get access to the entire model, meaning I show you what stats we use, how to factor those stats, how I create the line. You get everything. There's 3 posts and 3 videos that I made already on it. I'm going to do another update today and sort of talk about how to incorporate totals. So if you're a client or become a client, you get access to all that. So it's rare to spend that little amount of money and get access to all that. So link to join in the description if you're interested in doing that. All right, so next we're going to shift gears and talk about the classes model, and just give you what you're looking at is the log for FIFA World Cup 2025. This model, quote, classes model, has gone 16-7, very high win percentage, up plus 4.2 units. And I'll give you an overview of classes model. And let me see if I can show this on the screen here. Yeah, if we slide over. All right, so what Class's model is, and to give you an idea of where this came from, this is very similar to horse racing and greyhound racing. All right, so in horse racing and greyhound racing, I think this is true for horse racing. They'll have an A horse, a B horse, a C horse, a D horse. So when you're starting out as I remember this from greyhound racing. That's sort of where my background. I actually wagered on greyhound racing as well back in the day, and sort of had aspirations to be a professional greyhound handicapper. But in essence, if a dog in D class wins, he moves up to C class. Or if say an A class greyhound, I'm not sure how they do it, but I think if they don't finish in the top 3 for 4 straight races, something like that, then they move down a class. So in essence, we're taking that same type concept and applying it to sports and handicapping. So the difficult part when you do this, and you can see here with the rankings, I have an A class teams for FIFA World Cup. I have B teams, I have C teams, and D teams. And the bigger dispersion between those will increase your win percentage. So the way I found that it works best with FIFA World Cup is to play 4 A teams. Irregardless of a line, I think the way I figured it on the tracker, if the lines were minus 500 or less, yes, you're going to end up playing a lot of juice teams, but you're going to win at a high percentage. So anytime an A team is playing, if it's minus 500 or less, we play for the A teams. I tracked it playing against the D teams earlier, and it wasn't as successful. So when you look at this tracker here, that shows playing for the A teams. And again, the difficult part really is figuring out which teams are going to be A teams, which teams are going to be B teams, C teams, and D teams. And to give you another sport to help you understand this, let's look at college football. College football, let's say the SEC. I would say not all the teams in the SEC, majority of the teams, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, all of those teams would be A teams. Now, let's look at a team like Air Force. I think Air Force still plays in the Mountain West. I'm not sure or if that league is dissolved or not, but let's just use Air Force example. I wouldn't even give Air Force a grade of a B team. I would make Air Force a C team. So if any of those A teams in the SEC was playing Air Force, then we would play for the A team, irregardless of the spread to some degree. Some sports, like when it's a spread sport, you need to cap it. And I think for college football, I capped it at minus 19. Meaning more times than not, if an A team is playing a B team or even a C team, and that line is, minus 18, minus, 19, more times than not, they're going to be able to beat that team by 3 touchdowns or more. So there's some subjectivity that you have to factor in and play with it. But for the most part, if you can figure this out, how to categorize those teams, you don't really create lines per se. Now, I create lines, and I'll show you that over on this page, like here. I actually created a line like today, Inter Milan's playing and Manchester City's playing. So I have the line for Manchester City minus 575. They're an A team playing against a D team, and we have Inter Milan playing against a B team in Series C, in Series A, Brazil Series League, but it's an A team going against a B team. And interesting, that line is like Inter Milan's like minus 147, probably because they're playing a B team, whereas Manchester City is playing a D team. And that line, I think, is like minus 400. But both of those would be placed via the model because they're A teams. So it's worked really well. And this is something that I've sort of put together in the last, I would say, last year or so. And let me show you another example of this. This was from the NCAA tournament. We actually wagered this live, but wagered real small. This was extremely profitable. And I think with here, the way I did it was, again, it might change with different sports, but in essence, you're definitely going to play the A teams against a B team, a C team, or a D team to cover the spread. And I think here we played against a D team. So if a B team was playing a D team, we played against the D team. And it went 17-11, up 4.9 units for the NCAA tournament. And if you don't know, NCAA tournament, very, very difficult to handicap. So this model was extremely successful. And then a question you might have, especially if you're relatively sharp, what happens if an A team is playing another A team? So in essence, the way that I cap, that would be a 50-50 game. And not saying that's, again, you don't have a strong of an edge as an A team playing a C team, especially when you factor in the spread. But if two A teams are playing and say that spread's like a, -4 and a +4, then the edge would go to the A team that's +4. In fact, you might even play that on the money line. That's not the best way to do it, but if you made me handicap that game in terms of my approach, if they're both A teams, they would be equal. The edge would be with the B team. In fact, to give you a real simple concept you can apply to college football, say if you have two B teams playing, the way I handicapped it would be if the B team was a dog, you would play the dog on the money line if they were at home. Well, using your model, you're looking at these teams are relatively even, two B teams going against each other or two A teams. The reason you would only play home teams in college football win 70% of the time. So that's a way you can take the classes model and then take something I call a statistical property. If you're watching this podcast for the first time, a statistical property, that's a term I came up with. You don't hear it in the sports betting community, but it basically means a fact about that sport. So we're using the model, two B teams, relatively even, statistical property, home teams win 70% of the time. So we figure these teams to be even. We're applying that statistical property. Home teams win 70% of the time. So you're not going to win 70%, but hopefully you can win half of those. You're playing on the money line. That would be profitable long term. So it's worked for NCAA basketball, and then show you this model here. This is from NCAA football. And this was, again, I like to be transparent. I ran this for the first 3 weeks of the season. So if you open the season and you're using classes model, you really don't need stats. So you're trying to, again, I will preface this by saying the difficult part of doing this from a handicapper's perspective is figuring out which teams are A teams, B teams, C teams, and D teams. And obviously the most important would be an A team and a D team. Those are most important because the model is going to be successful playing against the D teams and playing for the A teams. But first 3 weeks of the college football season, this went 67-50. So I'm going to run this pretty much the entire season. And obviously from week to week, that can change. We did it in the FIFA World Cup. We had Benfica. I think they're I think that's Portugal team. They were pretty much a B team. We bumped them up to A team. Chelsea, English Premier League, starting the playoffs, we bumped them down to a B team. Both of those teams played, I think it was Friday or either Saturday, and ended up in a draw. So I feel like that was a good change I made. Benfica, I think, was plus 230 or something like that. So that was basically a 50-50 game book-wise. And, we had an A team going against a B team. So technically the way that I cap, that was a good play and a chance for an A team to cash at plus 30, plus 230, even though they didn't. But this is a very good modeling concept. And again, the only difficult part would be, figuring out a lot of different ways to do it. I'm going to make a formal coaching video for clients on some different approaches and how you would do this. But in essence, once you get those A teams and D teams sorted out, relatively easy to get the B and the C teams done, but it's something that can be very, very profitable. And what I want to do is show you application of this to a different sport. I'm not saying to do this, but just so you can sort of see it and understand it. So these are the power rankings for WNBA. This is for yesterday. So we have Golden State, best team in WNBA via my model, okay? Followed by Minnesota, Atlanta, Dallas, Vegas, Seattle, Phoenix, Washington, Indiana, Chicago, Connecticut, Liberty, and Los Angeles. And I've mentioned this before, and this is something else that I've sort of grown as a handicapper to understand. Anytime you're creating a line, meaning you're taking stats and converting that into a line, there will be a margin of error in doing that. And the classes model to some degree is similar to the top 10 concept, which means like in baseball, we were successful last couple of years just running the model, not running any lines, but just playing the top 10 teams via the model. So that was very successful the last 2 years. Obviously didn't work this year, had to make some changes, bring in starting pitching, but it's relatively close to classes model to some degree. One way you can do this, I'm not saying to apply it to a normal sport like WNBA, NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, but you could. So for example, since you only have a small amount of teams, I think there's 13 teams in the WNBA. So that means the mean or the middle team is going to be between 6 and 7. So you got Golden State's 1, Minnesota 2, Atlanta 3, Dallas 4, Vegas 5, Seattle 6. And of course, Phoenix is 7. So then the middle teams, what we would call average teams, are going to be Vegas and Seattle. All right. So the way I would do this, I would make Golden State, Minnesota, and Atlanta A teams because you want some sort of gap. So you see what I'm saying? So Dallas is, probably more closer to the middle. Same with Vegas. And you want some separation for your A team. So we'll make the top 3 teams via the model A teams. And let's come down here and make Connecticut, New York Liberty, and Los Angeles D teams. So again, what I'm doing is I'm using stats to rank these teams, and then I'm converting it into a classes model. And again, I'm just giving you some ideas, especially those that model, that have a pretty good understanding of how you could incorporate classes model by using power rankings. First off, use your stats, organize your teams. You're going to take the top teams, make them A teams, make the bottom teams D teams. Okay. And then to finish this out, just so we can make it look full, let's go make these B teams. And then we're going to let's make Seattle a B team, and then C, whoops, C. Just to give you an idea, we could do it that way. All right, so let's look at yesterday. So we're going to ignore the lines over here. So let's look for Golden State. All right, so these are the lines from yesterday. Golden State was playing Seattle, and you can see Golden State was an underdog. So that line was plus 185 Golden State. We come back to classes model here. Golden State was playing Seattle. So Seattle was a B team. So you had Golden State playing a B team. Again, play for the A team, and that would have been a plus 185 dog cash. And I think plus 185 was the best odds. But you can see it was, it worked. All right, let's look at the next one here. Minnesota. Go back and find out who Minnesota was playing over here. So Minnesota was playing Connecticut, and that line was minus 20.5. It closed at minus 20.5. So again, you would want to figure out a line, maybe you would only play up to minus, 15. I'm not sure what I did with NCAA basketball, but I had a cap on it, meaning like if it was greater than, I'm not sure the number, it might have been close to this number or just under that. But nonetheless, Minnesota, let's look at the power rankings, was an A team playing Connecticut, which was a D team. So that's exactly what we want. Dispersion between an A team and D team, they easily cover the 20 points. All right, and then finally we'll look at Atlanta. Atlanta was an A team. Let's go over here and see who Atlanta was playing. Atlanta was playing New York, and that line had really good movement. With that line, it opened at plus 3.5, closed at minus 1.5. They were playing New York. Let's go back and look at the model. So you had Atlanta here, an A team, playing New York Liberty, a D team. They won and covered. So there can be application of this classes model just to make it very simple to, normal sports like WNBA, football. And I'm working on something similar to this with NFL. I think there might be a way to make this work with NFL as well. But anyway, again, just to review this concept, classes model, you want to create an A team, B team, C team, a D team. And then depending on the sport, you might have to do some testing. It's either going to be play for the A teams or play against the D teams. And obviously you could, depending on that sport, maybe it's NHL where you have a lot of dogs cash. Same with Major League Baseball. If you have 2 B teams playing against each other, it would favor the dog. Same with 2 C teams. But just a very simple way to do it. And obviously the hard part is figuring out which teams are A teams, which teams are D teams. It could change on a weekly basis, a daily basis, et cetera, et cetera. But definitely a very interesting concept. And obviously I've proven that it's profitable. And this is another reason why I'm super excited about applying this and sticking with this for the entire duration of college football season. All right, before we go, I do want to give a big shout out to Eric. Those of you who don't know the backstory, Eric is our resident UFC handicapper. He started studying modeling with me probably, I can't even remember, maybe 4 years ago, something like that, and has now become a very, very, very successful handicapper. You can actually get access to his UFC plays through my site, MGCovers. We give out a free play the first of the week. But anyway, I want to talk about, how successful he's been in UFC. And then even though we know modeling is difficult to do, you don't have to have an NBA model. You don't have to have a Major League Baseball model. As sports change, you don't have to constantly, okay, now it's baseball season. I got to build a successful Major League Baseball model. All right, football season's rolling around. I got to have a successful NFL model. You really don't. And especially if you can find, one or two sports and really focus on that. And he was always passionate about UFC. I helped him build his first model. It's nothing like this model. Even though we did have success with that original model, he's tweaked it now. You can see here he's up 23 units for the first 6 months of the year, 63 and 28. His average odds are minus 143. He plays a lot of juice, but he's hitting at 69%. Still a very, very solid ROI at 10%. And so if he's made 23 units through first 6 months of the season, if he duplicates that, maybe he will, maybe he won't, but man, that's 46 units a year off one sport, 46 units. And again, to tie in bankroll management, if you had a decent bankroll where you could wager $1,000 a play, that means you would be up 23 grand for the first 6 months of this year. And then applying it, assuming he hits 23 units in the next 6 months, that'd be 46 grand you would make just handicapping one sport. So very simple concept. Don't have to be successful in all sports. Find one or two that can do it. You could be very successful in this business. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in the podcast. Talk to y'all soon.